At exactly 6:47 a.m. local time on April 23, 2025, the USS William P. Lawrence switches on her automatic identification system as she begins her passage through the Taiwan Strait. Flipping that switch in this particular stretch of water is the military equivalent of strolling into a hostile neighborhood with your wallet dangling from your pocket. You're practically inviting a confrontation. The ship's captain is fully aware that just 53 miles away, at a Chinese military airbase, a radar technician is already reaching for the phone. Within moments, the base's scramble alarm cuts through the early morning calm, startling two J-16 pilots in the middle of their tea. It's Chinese Navy Day, and the Americans have shown up uninvited. Before the alarm finishes sounding, the pilots are already dashing to their aircraft, G-suits on and minds locked in. They know their twin-engine fighters require crucial warm-up time in the cool morning air. As they rush onto the tarmac, ground crews are swiftly yanking the safety pins from an arsenal that includes 4 PL-10 heat-seeking missiles and 2 radar-guided PL-15s. And here's what's worth paying attention to with that particular weapons loadout. These aren't anti-ship missiles. They're air-to-air munitions, and that's the entire message. The Chinese are staging a demonstration, one designed to show just how near they can fly to a U.S. warship. So close, in fact, that if their payload were YJ-83 anti-ship missiles instead, the Lawrence would already be a smoking wreck. Meanwhile, inside the Lawrence's Combat Information Center, the ship's advanced radar begins stitching together the morning's aerial picture. A few American jets are visible here. A China Airlines flight climbing from Taipei there. Dozens of fishing vessels dot the strait below. All of it is seamlessly integrated by the Aegis combat system, forming a unified situational display across every screen and console. It's the closest thing to a divine perspective, a real-time, omniscient view covering a 250-mile radius. And in just under 7 minutes, 2 more blips will appear on those screens, racing toward them at high velocity. The path of this confrontation has already been set. At its narrowest point, the Taiwan Strait compresses to just 130 kilometers across. The Lawrence is navigating that sliver with pinpoint precision, balancing between territorial boundaries like a performer on a tightrope. Her radar is capable of tracking the incoming Chinese fighters from more than 200 miles away. But the engagement rules are unambiguous. Weapons are only to be fired in clear-cut self-defense. By 6:52 a.m., both J-16 fighters have taken to the air and are ascending past 10,000 feet. Each aircraft's weapons systems officer runs a rapid checklist, while the 35,000-pound jets continue to gather speed. Hydraulic systems, check. Navigation systems, go. Weapons, fully armed. The Type 1475 AESA radar powers up in seconds. Its 1,760 transmit-receive modules operating in flawless synchronization. And here's what makes this radar truly lethal. Unlike older systems that broadcast in all directions, like a rotating lighthouse, the Type 1475 radar can focus its emissions with pinpoint precision. It's capable of locking onto an American destroyer like a laser beam, while staying almost invisible from other angles. Among U.S. aviators, it's earned a nickname that says it all, the Ghost. You might not even realize it's targeting you, not until a missile is already slicing through the sky. And in exactly 23 seconds, the USS Lawrence's combat systems will detect something that turns the entire situation upside down. Inside the Lawrence, the SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite is quietly sweeping the electromagnetic spectrum across hundreds of miles. It logs everything, from fishing boat radars to civilian air traffic control signals, and even mobile phone towers. But now, something different cuts through the noise. 2 airborne radars transmitting in the X-band, with a pulse repetition pattern that unmistakably identifies them as military-grade fighter systems. The EW suite captures each pulse, building digital fingerprints, while a sailor enables full recording across the ship's systems. At precisely 7:11 a.m., the situation intensifies. High above at 20,000 feet, the lead J-16 pilot inverts his aircraft, angling his nose downward toward an empty patch of sea, precisely where his radar tells him an American warship should be. Through the helmet-mounted display, the destroyer radiates like a Christmas tree across the electromagnetic spectrum. He levels back out, then pitches down sharply, diving to convert altitude into blistering speed. At just 500 feet above sea level, he steadies his fighter and initiates an aggressive attack run. What follows is a calculated lesson in precision and nerve. His onboard fire control computer is running intercept vectors non-stop, recalculating every fraction of a second. In a real engagement, his PL-15s could be unleashed from as far out as 120 miles, comfortably beyond the reach of most of Lawrence's defenses. But the goal today isn't to fire. It's to demonstrate they could have. And that demands a far riskier move, closing the distance. Flying at this altitude and speed pushes both machine and man to their limits. At 500 feet and 450 knots, the J-16 slices through the dense sea air, both Saturn engines guzzling 400 pounds of fuel every minute. One misstep, a blink too long or a twitch too soon, and that $70 million jet turns into a smoking crater in the ocean. His targeting pod, a WMD-7 electro-optical system, locks firmly onto the superstructure of the destroyer. The image stabilization is so precise that, despite the turbulence from his own jet wash, he can still make out the individual hull numbers on the ship's frame. All of that imagery is streamed directly into his helmet-mounted display. Distance to target, closing speed, time until closest approach, every detail calculated to deliver the highest possible threat signature without triggering an actual international crisis. Meanwhile, aboard the Lawrence, the defensive systems are nearly overwhelmed, bombarded with a storm of data. The spy radar keeps a steady track on the approaching fighter, while the Aegis system simultaneously runs intercept calculations for the RIM-162 ESSM missiles housed in the destroyer's vertical launch cells. The system knows exactly which tubes to open, which missiles to arm, and what trajectory would ensure a direct hit. But the launch commands remain dormant, the weapons stay cold. The Chinese pilot is well versed in American naval doctrine. He's pored over every publicly available report on Aegis capabilities, committed engagement envelopes to memory. He knows that once he's inside 3 miles, he's beneath the optimal range for SM-2 interceptors, and directly inside the engagement zone of the ESSMs. At just 1 mile, even the ESSMs fall outside the practical reaction window. At that point, only the phalanx CIWS, the ship's last line of defense, could possibly respond. It's an aerial version of Chicken, played at Mach 0.7. His wingman flies a perfect parallel track 5 miles off to the east, executing what fighter pilots call a bracket. If the destroyer tries to lock radar onto one aircraft, the other retains a clean shot vector. It's a Cold War tactic, a strategic dance of positioning, now playing out live in front of American sensors. The message being sent is unmistakable. We've planned for every outcome, calculated every approach, and the only reason you're still afloat is because we chose not to act today. The wingman's 5-mile offset widens the engagement envelope, forcing the Lawrence to divide its attention. His radar, operating in sea search mode, picks up the American ship from 45 miles out, a 509-foot silhouette moving at 18 knots across the water. Instantly, the onboard computer starts running engagement parameters. But none of those numbers will be used, not today. Their mission isn't to launch. It's to make it clear that they could have. Had these J-16s been armed with YJ-83 anti-ship cruise missiles, they would only need to close within 20 to 30 miles to release them at ideal range. After launch, those missiles would drop to sea-skimming altitude, barely above the waves. From there, the Lawrence's crew would have roughly 10 seconds, maybe less, to respond once the missile's radar signature revealed itself in its final attack phase, triggering a race between ESSMs and SM-2s. But that's not the script today. Instead, ground control guides the fighters using data relayed from shore-based radar installations. The controller, just like the pilots, understands U.S. rules of engagement by heart. They know America won't fire in response to provocation alone. But circling in from the rear offers better surveillance angles and better intelligence footage. Inside the Combat Information Center, watchstanders begin to notice a flood of fresh alerts populating their displays. The J-16's radar signature has shifted. It's no longer just scanning. It has transitioned into a track-while-scan mode, hitting the Lawrence with focused pulses every 2 seconds. At the same time, the Chinese KG-800 electronic warfare pods begin powering up, preparing to unleash a flood of signal interference across multiple radar bands. These jamming pods aren't blunt instruments. They can precisely target the frequencies used by the destroyer's fire control radars, with the potential to blind them at exactly the wrong moment. 20 miles out, the lead Chinese pilot spots a faint gray silhouette forming against the horizon. He clicks his radar to standby to reduce his detectability and switches over to electro-optical tracking. Zooming the targeting pod to its highest magnification, he sees the American warship in stunning clarity despite the haze hanging over the strait. Radar panels are clearly visible, weapons mounts identifiable, and even individual sailors can be seen moving across the deck. At a distance of 5 miles, the Lawrence's CIWS system automatically locks onto the approaching jets. Looking much like our 2D2 on steroids, the CIWS is the ship's final line of defense. A 20mm Gatling gun capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute. The system now has an exact track on the J-16s, but its guns remain silent, in standby mode. With a single button press, the Lawrence could unleash a curtain of tungsten that would obliterate anything flying through it. But no such command is given. The lead J-16 levels out just 3 miles astern of the destroyer, lining himself perfectly with her wake. Through his heads-up display, the silhouette of the American warship dominates his field of view. He pushes both throttles forward, igniting the afterburners in a deafening surge of power. At a single mile, he can distinguish individual crew members on the flight deck. At half a mile, the ship's name, William P. Lawrence, is clearly legible on her stern. At 1,000 feet behind, the fighter roars overhead at just 300 feet of altitude, slightly offset to starboard for the ideal camera angle. The jet wash from his twin Saturn AL-31F engine slams into the destroyer's superstructure. Sailors brace against the violent gusts, gripping railings and leaning into the artificial gale. The ship's anemometer surges briefly to 95 knots before stabilizing. In the CIC, the incident is logged without emotion. Time: 7 hours 11 minutes and 34 seconds. Aircraft type: J-16. Altitude: 300 feet. Lateral separation: 50 feet. The Aegis system has already run 17 separate engagement solutions. Standard protocol for every tracked object, whether threat or friendly. It constantly calculates, continuously ready. But this isn't the end. By 7:23 a.m., a more troubling rhythm develops. The J-16s begin alternating passes every 2 minutes, one swooping from astern, the other from the beam. They stay between 300 and 400 feet above sea level, just high enough to claim safety if questioned. Every maneuver is deliberate, close enough to rattle nerves and make headlines, yet distant enough to remain technically non-provocative. The lead pilot shifts into what intelligence analysts call a capabilities display. He decelerates to 150 knots, keeps his landing gear up, flaps partially extended, and glides alongside the Lawrence, maintaining a half-mile lateral distance. His targeting pod holds a flawless lock on the bridge of the destroyer as he maintains perfect formation. The message couldn't be clearer. I can track you every second I choose to. While the PL-15s under his wings are air-to-air missiles by design, at this range, the implication is unmistakable. If he were equipped with anti-ship missiles, he'd already be well within striking distance. The PL-10s perched on his wingtips are capable of locking onto targets via his helmet-mounted sight, meaning wherever the pilot looks, the missile can follow. Though designed to engage hostile aircraft, In this moment, the threat they represent is deliberately projected. Meanwhile, the wingman decides to put on a show of his own, executing a supersonic flyby at 1,000 feet. The resulting sonic boom rips across the sea like rolling thunder, sending a shudder through the American destroyer, though causing no actual harm. Bridge windows buzz with vibration. Coffee cups hop on their trays. A few sailors instinctively wince, but not one breaks from their duties. At precisely 7:38 a.m., the tactical picture intensifies. The ship's radar picks up a new contact dead ahead, a Chinese Type 052D destroyer, the Hufei, China's most advanced surface combatant, maneuvering to intercept the Lawrence. Almost simultaneously, two more J-16 fighters arrive from the Chinese mainland, their fuel tanks full and their pilots rested and alert. The arrival of these fresh aircraft brings a renewed edge to the encounter. The lead pilot starts his approach from 10,000 feet, using altitude to build energy for a high-speed dive. These new J-16s carry the same armament, 4 PL-10 heat seekers for dogfighting and 2 PL-15s for long-range engagements. But as before, the payload isn't the point, proximity is. The lead pilot levels off at just 200 feet above the surface, lower than those who came before, but still within what could technically be called safe operating limits. At a blistering 500 knots, the American destroyer fills every pixel of his heads-up display. When he reaches the closest point of his pass, he's only 300 feet above the ship, offset just 100 feet to starboard. At the same time, the Hufei draws within 8 miles, her powerful Type 346A radar firmly locked onto the Lawrence. In her vertical launch system, the YJ-18 anti-ship missiles remain dormant, but their silent presence says more than words ever could. These missiles, if launched, would accelerate to Mach 3 in their terminal phase, giving the Lawrence mere seconds, not minutes, to detect, react, and defend. The second J-16 executes the most audacious maneuver of the day, a crossing pass at just 150 feet altitude, slicing 500 feet ahead of the destroyer's bow. Through the bridge windows, the fighter jet momentarily fills the entire horizon, its twin afterburners casting twin cones of fire against the dull gray morning sky. A second later, the thunderous roar hits, drowning out every voice and every radio transmission on the bridge. The commanding officer of the Lawrence now finds himself at the center of a meticulously crafted dilemma. Chinese military assets have surrounded his ship in all directions, aircraft above, a guided missile destroyer in front, and almost certainly submarines lurking below. Despite the provocation, his rules of engagement remain unchanged. Respond only in self-defense. Transit peacefully. Record everything. Do not provoke. By 7:52 a.m., the pressure campaign hits its breaking point. One J-16 fighter screams in from directly ahead, while another barrels in from behind, both flying at 300 feet. Simultaneously, the Hufei pushes to 30 knots, rapidly closing the gap between warships. It's a textbook display of synchronized intimidation. But then, a boundary is crossed. The lead J-16 descends to a dangerously low altitude, just 120 feet, diving well below any internationally accepted safety minimum. He closes in to within 200 feet off the Lawrence's port side. At the same moment, the second fighter performs a blistering flyby just 400 feet above the destroyer's starboard beam. The Lawrence now finds herself caught in a calculated clamp maneuver, with Chinese jets violating multiple air safety thresholds from opposing vectors. Instantly, her CIWS systems come alive. Both automated gun mounts snap to the threat, locking onto the incoming aircraft. The Vulcan cannons spin up to pre-firing revolutions, ready to fire within milliseconds. At that moment, the only thing preventing a full-scale war is the absence of a single trigger pull. Tension saturates the combat center. The tactical action officer's hand hovers mere inches from the fire inhibit switch. On the radar displays, two strong contacts converge at speed with each rotation of the scope. For 5 agonizing seconds, the fate of the Indo-Pacific teeters on a knife's edge. The Chinese pilots remain in their aggressive postures. Afterburners lit, radars focused, they push the envelope as far as it can go. Inside the Lawrence, every defensive system strains against its digital restraints, prepared to act. And then, just as suddenly as it peaked, the moment passes. Both J-16s break away, banking hard and climbing out at steep angles. The Americans didn't flinch, and the Chinese yield the game of aerial chicken. As the jets rise and disappear, the Sea-Wiz turrets stand down, ending their pursuit as the contacts fade from range. Only now do the cruise pulses begin to return to normal. The J-16s are nearly out of fuel. The Hufei alters course, no longer intercepting, but pacing the U.S. ship in a parallel track. The Lawrence presses on, holding 18 knots toward the south, her crew quietly absorbing how close they just came to a shooting conflict. That concludes this episode of Red Zone Secrets, where we deliver the most timely and in-depth military insights, backed by expert analysis from strategists and defense insiders. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us keep producing high-quality content. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next one.